But the converse is true. If you are European, you get visa upon arrival. If you are Chinese, you get visa upon arrival. Even if you don't get it upon arrival, it's made very easy. You have opportunities. I've seen Chinese in many parts of Africa. Chinese, Europeans, Lebanese, they come to the continent of Africa without a single cent, and their governments sometimes are taking care of them. Within 3 years, they are multimillionaires. Africa is still a perfect hunting ground for other civilizations. But when an African goes to Europe, a few days ago I had a young girl who left the continent of Africa having been adopted, and her parents died in a motor accident in Brussels. She lived in the streets for 1 year until a good Samaritan picked her. She's now pulled herself together, and she came to my office and said, I now want to serve Africa. 3 months ago, a young Nigerian who is now in Italy came to my office. He had never been to the continent for 15 years. He is now working in Italy, and he says, I now want to do things in the continent of Africa. In other words, we of the African stock must regain our self-esteem. We must decolonize our minds, and as I've said many times before, and I say it ad nauseum, we must never imagine that we are children of a lesser God. And that can only happen if we have faith in our abilities. And I've already said that in a number of African countries, Africans are already beginning to recognize that we have such abilities. When I travel across the world, the number of Nigerians, the number of Kenyans that I see doing great things, the number of Ghanaians that I see doing great things, and Liberians in the diaspora. The only thing they're asking, create an enabling environment. We don't want to come home and government bureaucrats and politicians are asking us for bribes. Create an environment where we can survive and thrive and do things and create employment, and Africa will be El Dorado. That we must do and can do. There's a saying which I love, that if you behave like grass, goats will eat you. And that is the reality of the world. The Europeans, and I don't begrudge them, they have a duty to protect their societies, because they have a genuine fear that if they continue to accept immigrants without control, then in the near future, what will happen is that demographies will change. And if the demographies change, then they will be controlled. It is now not surprising, for example, that in the United Kingdom, the Prime Minister is of Indian stock. And in Scotland, the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister is of Pakistani stock. And they are scared. And that is why you are going to see countries such as Germany, for example, restricting immigration to Turks. You will see the Swedish restricting immigration to Eritreans, the Finns, and make the path very long in order to ensure that if you become one of their own, even if your skin color is different, you have been thoroughly and sufficiently indoctrinated to be one of their own. So you can have a black face, but inside of you, you think like a Dane. So that is the reason why they are doing it. If on our part we are weak, we will be dealt with. So it is our duty also to ensure that we have reciprocal laws that make sure that we accommodate foreigners, because I think as a part of a global interaction, there is no harm in having people from different civilizations working in our environment and enriching our environment, but they must go through a step-by-step process if they want to become Nigerians or Kenyans or Ghanaians or Sao Tomians and Principes or Equatorial Guineans or Namibians. There must be a path. Not they come for 1 day or 2 days or 1 week and they bribe a particular politicians, and lo and behold, they are citizens and establishing police stations around the continent of Africa. We must rekindle the fire of revolution. Revolution is must be a permanent state of human change. Revolution to mean change for the better. And what has happened in the recent past, particularly coming up with the 1960s, the culture of celebrities, the culture of entertainment, what I call hedonism, enjoying life for life's sake, that has made us to forget the fundamentals of the world. Our world is filled with entertainment and filled with all these things which have their own place. The arts have their own place. But that must never allow us or be an excuse for forgetting the fundamental issues. And I want to see a critical mass of young people yearning for the things that really sustain society. And it is not as if it is not happening. It is. The media is also responsible for suppressing voices of reason and giving the oxygen of publicity to the things that merely entertain. So we must also, in the nature of things, create media that is going to give prominence to the thing that we ought to have as prominent. And for example, Africa. We Africans, our story is told by others. We don't have what I may describe as a Pan-African media. I know personally we are now involved in an initiative that is meant to do exactly that. So our story is told by CNN, by BBC, by Al Jazeera, by Radio Deutsche Welle, or those Western institutions, or CGTN, and our news gathering is done by Reuters and Xinhua. The time has come that we must also create media that is going to tell our story. The spirit is there. The spirit is there. What we need is to rekindle it. In fact, I think that there are many young Africans now who are being attracted to the right things, who want to do the right things, and they are speaking, but their voices are muffled. So it is our duty, as I've said already, to give the oxygen of publicity to those voices, but not just voices. There must be an intercourse between word and deed so that we give birth to what we desire, which is good quality of life, where men and women have dignity to serve themselves and serve humanity and serve God. Have a single country. Let us unite. If we don't unite, we are going to be conquered again. Let us have a single currency. Let us have a single economic policy. Let us have a single foreign policy. We did not follow Kwame Nkrumah, with the consequence that the British had created their Commonwealth, and therefore we traded with them. Their former colonies traded with them. The French had created their own body for former French speakers, and they retained control, including printing their own currency and requiring that their former colonies pay some kind of tithe, if you may, to them. And that continues to date. Why do I give this history? I give this history that you may understand why, even in this day and age, young Africans want to leave the continent. Why do they want to leave the continent? Because if you go to agriculture, Africa still remains, or African countries are still producers of primary goods. Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana are the largest producers of cocoa. But who makes the chocolate? The Swiss, the Belgians. Minerals. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the largest producer of coltan, which is found in every mobile telephone. Who makes the mobile telephone? It is Korea, it is the United States, it's Canada, it is Norway, it is Finland, it is Sweden. So where are the jobs created outside of Africa? What about gold and diamond? Where are they traded? In Antwerp, in Belgium. If you look at the leather industry, we have hides and skins. Where are they exported to Italy? So where are the jobs created in Italy? If you look at cotton, where are the textile industries? They are not situated within the continent of Africa. So African countries are simply producers of primary products, and therefore the opportunities are few and far between. You look at the economy of Africa, and if you use GDP as a measure, the 54 African countries have, give or take, a combined GDP of no more than 3 trillion United States dollars, which means that the economy of the state of California in the United States of America is bigger than the economies of all 54 African countries combined. We don't consume technology. So young people go to school, and we were made to believe that when you go to school, you'll get employment. So we are not innovators, we are not creators. And that is why, therefore, you see this thing that you now call the exodus. Young men and women seeking opportunities, crossing the Sahara, dying in the Mediterranean. Sometimes they don't even follow that route. They go to Latin America, they go to Suriname and Colombia and begin to walk through Mexico to go to the borders of the United States of America. They go, some of them who want to be more formal, go to the embassies of United States of America, Canada, Australia, and they are humiliated there. Some of them are playing the lottery for the American green card. Those who have skills, whether they are nurses and doctors and engineers or tech-savvy individuals, also want to leave the continent because the continent does not have the opportunities. I remember so very painfully at one time, I'm in Austria, and I'd say, come back home. And a young Zimbabwean doctor tells me, you know, when I left Zimbabwe, I was earning the equivalent of 50 United States dollars. And there were no equipment in the hospital where I was. How do I go back home? I said, I hear you. So the reason why young men and women are running away is because African continent and African countries do not create opportunities. And who is to be blamed? We can blame everybody else, but we must also blame ourselves. It is no longer available to us to say that we cannot do it because there are countries in Africa that have done it and outside of Africa. Korea, South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. I'm mentioning little countries that have done it, and we can do it. They don't have natural resources. What they have had is what I call political hygiene, and individual politicians and groupings of politicians who have their countries at heart. In the continent of Africa, I'm already beginning to see some countries where there are leaders who have created an environment where it can be done. Like him or hate him, within less than 30 years, Paul Kagame of Rwanda has demonstrated that a country can rise up from the ashes like a phoenix and begin to move in the right direction. In Mauritius, during the administration of Sasiwu Sagur Ramgulam, he has demonstrated that it can be done. Botswana, through Ian Khama, has also demonstrated that it can be done. In Tanzania, we now see the activities initially, the foundation stone laid by Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, and the injection of what I call steroids into the system by John Joseph Pombe Magufuli, and the continuation by Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan is telling me that it can be done. And if it is done, then young Africans will begin to say, there is nothing that I'm going to do in Italy. There is nothing that I'm going to do in Spain. There is nothing that I'm going to do in that part of the world. Then they'll come home. But if we don't create opportunities and we are engaged in conflict and we judge people by their ethnic extraction and by their religious extraction and not by the content of their character, as Martin Luther King Jr. enjoined us to do, then young men will always move to those places. I remember listening to a young lady who had tried to get to Italy many times. And she was interviewed. She was from Nigeria, and she said, I'll try and try again. And even if I die, let it be so, but I'm not going back to my country. Sometimes I wish that those footages could be played at the plenary meeting of the African Union, and thereafter played at the plenary meeting of all the regional bodies in the continent of Africa, that the politician may see that they are the authors of this environment and the authors of African misfortune. God will judge them harshly until they say their mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I travel across Africa and I'm seeing amazing things. I remember I was in Monrovia and I met a group of young men who had collected money. They wanted to go to Europe and they listened, and today they are running cyber cafes in the streets of Monrovia. Yesterday to mean the day before, I listened to a young person in La Côte d'Ivoire who has now started making chocolates, selling 20 tons a month. In other words, jobs will be created at home. I see young Africans in the tech industry who are now beginning to take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution and the fifth industrial revolution, and they are creating jobs at home. I see people with blockchain and getting into the space of cryptocurrency. In other words, the African young man and woman must now begin to believe that education is not for employment. Education gives you the tools and the equipment and opens your mind to opportunities and possibilities. And once that has happened, then you innovate and invent. And once you innovate and you invent, particularly in the context of Africa Agenda 2063 and the African Continental Free Trade Area, then there will be multiple opportunities. Africa conservatively has a population of 1.5 million. You just imagine this. The opportunities that can be created. That we stop importing second-hand clothing, which we do. That we make them in the continent. That we stop importing leather shoes, we make them in the continent. We stop importing mobile phones, we make them in the continent. We